Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I was muted, so you're.
Oh, okay.
you're fine.
It's like we actually might have a problem here, but no. Okay.
All right, we'll start in 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Henry Smith. I'm the marketing specialist here at the Roper Center for Public Opinion Research. I want to welcome you to the fall 2022 Roper Roundtable. It's my pleasure to introduce Kathleen Weldon, who's the Roper Center Director of Data Operations and Communications here. And she's going to speak about some exciting developments here at Roper, specifically the release of trends in Roper iPoll. And Roper trends are an exciting development we first came out with in the health poll database, but now have also then taken that technology and introduced that in Roper iPoll. So that's available to all of our members who have access to iPoll right now. So without further ado, I will introduce Kathleen and look forward to hearing what she has to say. Kathleen, thanks very much for taking the time today as well to speak with everyone.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to show this to you. People have been asking for trends forever, as far as I can tell. And I have a slideshow to start with, and then we're going to go and do a demo. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what—
Kathleen, pardon me for interrupting, but so just a quick housekeeping note. I just want to let people know that they can ask questions at any time. Use the Q&A, if you will, to ask questions, and then I'll have Kathleen will open up the floor at the end, and I'll unmute folks at the end, and we'll have a Q&A session. I apologize for derailing you like that, Kathleen. I just realized that I missed one of the major functions as a host that I needed to deliver, and so maybe I should backtrack and say that. So use the Q&A button if you have a question for Kathleen as we go along. And if it makes sense, I'll let her know that your question's there. Okay, thanks, Kathleen.
Oh, no problem. So I first want to go through what makes a trend, what we consider a trend, what sort of decision making went into what we have done for building trends, and then I will do the demo after. So let me start with sharing my screen. Is it going to let me do that? You have disabled screen sharing.
I have I?
Yep, and video, in fact, in case you're wondering why I'm static here.
Should be able to now.
Let's try it. Yes. There we go. With that. Okay, so how do we build our trends? Well, we have a fantastic tool internally called Trend Builder. This is not something that we have made available externally, largely because it's rather complex. And there's a lot of learning that goes behind getting ready to use it. However, it allows us to use the iPoll database to build trends in a very efficient manner. I'm sure many of you have searched in iPoll, downloaded questions, and put them together into a trend line. This allows us to do all of the checking of questions, all of the components that you have to look at in a question to determine if it is appropriate to put in the trend in one place. It also allows us to keep them updated and maintain the trends in the surveys. Okay, so this is the tool we use. It is based on the question database. So this is very important to realize, because that means it is not limited to those studies we have data sets for. As many of you may know, we have two ways that data comes into the center. Data providers share their data sets with us. And also we have the question database, now over 830,000 questions, which is all entered manually. It all comes from public press releases. That means it's more exhaustive. It includes more organizations. You don't have to be able to or willing to send a data set. And it is very up to date. You don't have to wait for people to send a data set, but it does mean that you are limited to that top line response, to the static general population number or likely voter number, whatever it is that they release in the general press release. That's what we're going to be building trends on. In some cases, there are questions that are filtered. So questions like that allow us to do trends by smaller subpopulations, but only the subpopulations on a trend. So in a question level, we can't break down the general public into subpopulations. So I'm telling you that I'm getting the bad news out of the way first, then we'll go into the good news. Oops, it's not moving. Why is it not moving? There we go. Oh. So this is what a Roper trend looks like. I know it's a very unfortunate choice. It's a dark choice, but it is also a dramatic one. This is a beautiful trend line in terms of cleanliness. It comes from Axios Ipsos. They started doing this trend early on in the pandemic, and they maintained it. You can see the cluster at the beginning. They were doing it very frequently. They spread out a little bit. The data points become a little further apart over time, recently even more so, but it has been consistently done. Exact same question wording, exact same organization, exact same methodology. That is not always the case. So we need to create guidelines, because then we have a large number of those. We have a large number of absolutely consistent trends, but we have a lot of other trends as well. Expectations for what counts as a trend are a little bit field specific. Economists tend to be used to having very clean data that comes out on a very regular schedule and is calculated in the same way every time. Whereas pollsters tend to borrow wordings from each other, take a question and use it with a slight variation, or use it across modes. They follow trends across modes over years. There are varying levels of tolerance for that type of variation. Some researchers are very concerned about things like house effects. You know, does this organization, even if it's following the same general methodology, maybe it's generally a RDD telephone sample, but you know, they're known for really pushing people to get answers and not accepting don't knows, and this other field organization does not do that. They are very willing to take a don't know on the first statement. Well, then you might get a house effect where there's a lot more don't knows in one and not in the other, right? So some people say that's really important. I don't want to mix my organizations. Some will throw all the organizations in. They'll be very loose about question wording as long as the question intent is the same. So we needed to draw the lines between what was going to be managed internally and what was going to be left up to the researcher. So we had these two goals. We wanted to make sure that the casual poll users, the people who were just coming to Roper looking for what's happened, when did people turn against Vietnam? When did people decide they were for legal marijuana? Would be able to find a trend that was clean and well made and consistent and reliable to get that information, but that advanced researchers are going to be able to customize and we're going to be able to make decisions about what they wanted to use their trend for. So we had three options. One is that we decide this question goes in. One option is the end user decides I'm going to exclude some of these things that they included. And the third is that you can merge multiple trend lines. So we made the data downloadable to ensure that people could, if they thought two questions were close enough to identical to merge them, they could do that very easily. So what are the elements that we look at? The target population and any subpopulation, the wording of the question, the response categories. Sometimes the wording implies that the response categories are part of that, but sometimes there's a range there. The organizations involved, the mode, the sampling procedures, and gap periods. How consistent does it need to be to really be a trend? So we're going to go through these one by one. Target population, we control that one. And that is one of the easiest ways people can make errors in building trends. They pull down a bunch of national adult polls and oops, why is everybody so positive about Obama? Oh, I mixed in a Democratic voter survey. So we wanted to ensure that people got the correct target populations. Most of these are national adult, again, because we're going off of national adult polls here, primary thing in iPoll. But there are registered voter, a few likely voter. There are some narrower samples that are subpopulations that are trended by different organizations. And there are also some state level trends from our state organizations. And again, if you feel comfortable putting together likely voters and registered voters, go for it. You can download those data files. So here is an example where we did have a subpopulation where they were asked the same question over time. We have that information at the question level, and we were able to trend that. We do actually prioritize trends on subpopulation groups that might be underrepresented in overall polling. Question wording. Ever heard of right track, wrong track? You know the funny thing about right track, wrong track as a question? Never actually says right track. It always says right direction, wrong track. Sometimes on economy, you can find the right track, wrong track. But if you're asking about the country in general, always right direction, wrong track. And there are many, many variations. There are people who would say that all of these are the same question. They're all trying to measure people's satisfaction with what the general feeling about the country, the general mood. But there are big variations here in wording. Some of them are very straightforward. Do you think the country's headed in the right direction or is on the wrong track? Some of them are a little more pretty seriously off on the wrong track. You might not want to combine those. So we kept things, there are a lot of them that have been trended individually. We do not merge them together. In this case, we identify them in the header mostly by the organization, because organizations tend to be consistent in their use of these measures. And we tend to be very strict because there are so many variations, and it is not always known how much variation question wording actually causes a difference in the final data, in the results. So there are a few exceptions. You get list questions that say, please tell me if you approve or disapprove of Donald Trump versus please tell me if you approve or disapprove of each of the following people. How about Donald Trump? The difference there we see as not problematic enough. Somebody might find it difficult. They might say it's not okay. All that information will be in the download. You can split those out, but we do allow that and we footnote it. The addition of or not seems to be consensus that or not is not enough of a balance to make any difference. So we allowed or nots for things like, should marijuana be legal in the United States? Should marijuana be legal in the United States or not, as the same question. Inclusion or exclusion of the words of the word that. Oh, this is all over the place. That is the bane of my existence. Do you think that? Do you feel that? It's just not a meaningful difference, and it happens even within a single organization. And when they put out their trends, sometimes I think they just type and go right over that. Introductory language. Now, if the introduction provides information about the actual question, for instance, many people are concerned about the economy. Is this one of your concerns? That type of thing. We do include it in the question. It has to be consistent. However, if it's just a matter of making the interview move naturally from one thing to another, moving on to a new topic, now I'm going to redo this. We don't even bother to footnote that. That is not really considered part of the question, even though it might be presented as part of the question in iPoll because it was presented in the release. It's part of the interviewer script. And exclusion of the words this or the Democrats in Congress versus Democrats in Congress, the issue, this issue, really don't make a difference. So again, we don't bother footnoting that. Also, we're very strict about response categories. This is part of the complexity of building these trends, that when organizations put out their press releases, they might put as the response categories as the answers for a particular question, things that are different looking but mean exactly the same thing. So somebody's calling someone on the phone and says, did you vote in the most recent election or not? And someone says, yes, I voted. Yes, I did vote. Yes, voted. All of these things would get coded as voted, and they might be presented in the press release as yes, voted, yes, did vote, yes. It's all the same question. It's all the same response category, but it looks completely different to a computer. So this has to be normalized by humans and make sure that, you know, they really are the same answer and that there's not some small variation that actually indicates a difference in the category. One complexity with that is that there's a lot of variation in how people present and whether they split out different aspects of the don't know, refuse, no opinions, skipped, no answer. Sometimes you'll see no answer and don't know. Sometimes you'll see no answer, don't know as a single item. In order to ensure we get the most trends we can without, you know, without losing trends for relatively trivial numbers. If we have one case, we don't have the ability to merge these groups and make it all one thing. So if you are looking at something, it may say that the don't knows are not shown. It will be in the download. Modes. Modes are important. Mode effects are real. Changes in modes can make a big difference in a trend, but not every researcher is bothered by a mode change. So we decided that this is something where we would allow end users to filter by mode. So we collapsed our metadata, which tends to be a bit more granular than this. You know, we have the cell phone sample, the landline sample, et cetera. And we just collapse that into in-person, mail, phone, or web. You can always go back to the individual surveys to find more detail about that, but for filtering purposes, that's what's available. And you can see when you are working with the interface, it's going to look like this. It's a big long trend that crosses time frames. So it goes from the in-person period in the 70s to the telephone period. And there are both. You can get rid of one or the other if you feel that people would have responded differently as a result of the mode. Organizations. As I mentioned before, house effects are can be quite real, but most polling researchers, they merge different organizations freely. They just put them together and are not overly concerned with moving from one organization to another. And it's one of the big advantages to using the iPoll database. You can get everybody, so you don't have to go to one person's site and another person's site and try to find all of these questions. You can identify questions that have been used by many organizations. So this is again a case where we let the end user filter out based on organization or not, depending on their choice. Sampling procedure. This is more serious of a difference. We have two collections, as many of you know, the longstanding methods collection and the recently developed methods collection. The recently developed methods collection includes, at this point, a lot of range of approaches, but many of them, most of them include some non-probability polling. The longstanding methods collection is probability-based. However, there's always a however. In the early years, all polling was quota-based. It was not probability-based. So in order to maintain trends that go back all the way into the 40s, you will be crossing from a quota method to a probability method. And it's important that you recognize that. We have lots of information about the historical methods on each question in the database, so you can take a look and understand where there might be differences as a result of that sampling change. But we do include those early years. We do separate out currently the long-standing methods, the recently developed methods. Recently developed methods has not been here long enough. We don't have enough data yet to actually have any trends in that collection. As more data comes in, we'll do that, but trends will not cross the collections. And those early years polling questions get identified. We have a note saying there is a difference in methods here. These are quota methods. Go see your documentation, take a look, understand it. Gaps were a little complex. We started and we said, well, we don't want to have gaps of more than 2 years. And then we found all these great questions that were asked again and again and again, but with gaps of 3 years. Or maybe there was a gap of 4 years in one section of, in the 90s, but they went all the way back through the 70s and all the way in. We realized we were not serving our users by hiding those questions from them. It was better that they know that those questions were asked, but we were concerned that people would not recognize that a gap indicates not a necessarily a linear change during that time frame. If it's been 10 years between questions, it's not just from one data point to the other. It could have gone up and down in that time frame. So ultimately, we relied on a technical solution. We changed the style of line for less than 2 years, 2 to 10 years, and greater than 10-year gaps in the survey. And that looks like that. There's some dashed lines and some solid lines indicating that some of these were asked quite close together, and some of them had big gaps. So be aware. And there's a note, if you have the whole screen up, that tells you essentially be aware. So right now, we have built 800 trends. The smallest is 5 points in time. That's what we consider a minimum for a trend. The largest at the moment is 1,400. That was fun to QA. We have identified more than 4,000 likely trends. Not every question, of course, has been asked more than once, but also not every question is really, practically speaking, trendable. Even if they have identical questions and responses, maybe the responses are so many that you have a 1 to 10 scale. It gets a little too messy to really be valuable to put it together that way. We're not trending every question that has been repeated. New trends come in all the time. Organizations start new tracking poll projects and start tracking something, maybe monkeypox, maybe something that comes in, comes out, and they start to track it, or they update older questions, sometimes questions that had only been asked once or twice, and now it's been asked a few more times, and that's a new trend. So in addition to the trends that we are building all the time, there are trends developing all the time. And we have a systematic scan that looks at similarities between newly added questions and existing trends. This happens once a week. We have a manual review by a data curator, and that person adds or rejects the suggestions from the scan, which allows us to maintain the trends. They're not going to get static. They're not going to get out of date unless they simply have not been asked. But if they have been asked, they're updated regularly and can be relied on to be updated on a weekly basis. It's really important. And without too much work. It's important to us. So I'm going to leave here. Oh, I think it isn't leaving there. We'll try again to go to the actual iPoll. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start by searching.
And that's working fine, Kathleen. You can see that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is it big enough?
It is.
Okay.
Looks great.
Okay, so I am going to look for Iraq. You see the questions tab that's then there, the studies datasets tab, and a new tab, the trends tab. Go over to the trends and you can scroll through. The information on the search results page gives you the interview dates, the question counts, and the topics it falls under. So it's helpful that you can see the range and the size of a trend before you go into it. The trends have quite a variation in size here. This one has 74. This one has 14. They are sorted default by most recent. You can switch it to sort by oldest, and that will be the first starting question in the trend. So it's not the end of the trend, it's the beginning of the trend. And let's see. Example, you click in, you see the name of the trend, the actual chart. Just click up here and you can print the chart or download it as an image or PDF. You get the core question. What is the question? If there's any minor variation, it will be noted there as well. The information about visualization, the dotted lines, dashed lines is always there. The citation is there and can be copied. And then you've got your customizations. You can pull out organizations or leave them be. Collection mode, in this case, there's only one. You can narrow it. So if you want to look in close and make a chart that just looks at a few years of a very long trend, that is possible here. You can simply move up to 2004 or something. And now you see you've zoomed in time-wise. And then you can download the trend data. And that will be an Excel spreadsheet. Give you the information. They're actually all from the same organizations merged together. Acceptable, unacceptable, no opinion. These are the normalized categories. There's the universe, the sample size, and the question wording. So if there's any tiny variation, including, you can see just a minor one here, these don't have periods, those do. You will be able to see all of that variation. And similarly, the response categories, any normalization that we did, you see the normalized versions over here, and you see the original over here. In this case, they were absolutely consistent, but we wanted to make sure that people were able to verify our work, make sure that we didn't make any errors, but also make sure that they are comfortable with the choices that we made.
Hey, Kathleen, we're not seeing your spreadsheet.
Oh, no. Oh, you know what? I think I did that the last time I did this too. One moment. One moment. I think I have to go back and new share it. Now?
Yes, I'm seeing it now.
Okay.
Great.
My apologies. My apologies. I thought.
Thanks, Lynn and Jeremy. Appreciate that.
Okay, so you get the question reference ID, which you can search in iPoll to just hop to that, and the archive number for the study, the sponsor, the survey orgs, the normalized response categories, any subpopulations, sample notes, the full question wording, and the original response categories. So you can use that as you wish. You can make your own chart. You can merge it with other charts. And now I'm going back to this. And just to look at looking at a sort of long, so that's a relatively short period. It's interesting to be able to look at something like the Iraq War and see which trends were kept up, compare the information, slight variations in, was it worth it? Was it worth the loss of American life? Was it worth the war? Was it worth, these very somewhat small changes in wording, but they give you different trends, and it's very interesting to look at things that way. I'm going to look for another I've got the right one there.
Kathleen, there's a great question on searching for trends and looking for trends. I'm wondering if you might take this question live here while you're literally searching for a trend. So Jeremy Darrington asked, it's helpful to see, the scale of how many trends that you've created already or will create. And so therefore, the size of the number of trends you already created it'd be unwieldy is to have one list. So he asks, is there a place on the site to browse categories of existing trends or like major featured trends? He said that in some recent searches, he's often surprised that some things have trends and others don't. And he wonders is there no trend, or is he not searching on quite the right term? So how can they reach out and scoop up all the trends on a topic if that the best way? The
best way to find the trends that have been built is to use the topics search. So if you're looking for trends on abortion, you can search the topic abortion and you will see all the abortion trends that we have built. Now, the issue here is that building over 4,000 possible trends takes a long time. And we didn't want to wait until every last trend was built to make them available to people. So we have just over 800 right now. We're adding them at a steady pace, a few a week, I would say. Sometimes we get big bursts and we do a lot of QA at once, and we can put up a dozen or 2 dozen in a week, but usually it's just a few a week. We will try to speed that up because we want to get to 4,000. We want to get them all done. But don't assume that because there isn't a built trend that there isn't a trend. What we do tend to do is look at a range of questions, look at the sort of questions we know that people tend to want to see. Not as much. Some questions are sort of more trivial in nature. It may not be the best way to put it, but there are questions that are really fundamental to an area. So we try to choose the things that we think people are going to be interested in. And we try to get the long trends. We try to look at the bigger ones. Sometimes it's good to do the short ones because you get a whole bunch done really quickly. It doesn't take as long to review and put together a trend of 5 points or 10 points as it does to put together a trend of 1,400 points. But we do understand that most people are interested in longer trends. They want to see the long range. So the I did not show you yet, and I can here. Let me just do another search. I'm going to keep that open for a second. Let's see. So if I search on the term economy, that gives you 33 trends. I think if you search on the topic economy, you'll get even more than that. If you are looking, so there's one of the state ones. So condition the United States economy these days. If you go back, I'm just trying to find an example of, yeah, other people do that, of course they do. Here we go. That was the Vanderbilt trend over here. And here is the symbol that indicates that this question is in a trend. So as you're browsing, you will run across those. So it's a way of finding them while you're going through the questions. But we have not eliminated the need to go through questions. But I do recommend considering looking at the topics that we have built. Going to trends and browsing that way. So the reason I brought up this one was just to give an example of a quite long trend. It goes from it goes fairly consistently from the 70s to 2020, but it was also asked way back here in 47. So that's a case where we really want to have those dotted lines. So I'm not sure, we have no idea what was going on between these periods, but it's important that you know this question was done by Gallup back in 47. It was picked up again by Gallup in 73. And then it actually became a GSS question. So you have both the GSS trends and the Gallup trends, and they're merged together. And people do that all the time, and it's great to save them the work of doing it. But you can also peel them apart if you would like to do so. The most important problem, trends. Oh.
So the question was asked for everybody else who's on the presentation. The question was asked, I get most important problem trend questions all the time. Right now we've only got one most important problem trend in the current Roper trends. And so the question was, would you consider asking more?
Well, here's the thing. Most of the most important problem questions are, and I will look at the available, versions of that and see if there's any more that we can pull out and get in there. But the big problem with the most important problem is that it is an open-ended question. So there are, over the years, many variations in what shows up. Sometimes things are a problem, and then no one thinks they're a problem. You know, you don't not seeing satanic cults lately. The 80s maybe you did. Things move in and out, and that makes for an unwieldy number of possible responses. Also, they've been coded differently over time. So in some periods, you'll see that jobs are their own thing. In some periods, jobs and economy are shoved together. It really depends on who is or how they are coding at that moment. So it's very hard to trend, and has been something we have been avoiding open-ended questions for trending. However, we do have this data set, which I highly recommend you use. This was a massive amount of work on the by Professor Laren Williams, and it is up to 2015. All of the most important problem questions from Gallup's open-ended normalized. And there are various ways these are put together. You have done an annual version and an individual, and you can download those and analyze it that way. It really, the amount of work involved in building that is sort of mind-blowing, and I'm really grateful he was willing to make it available to others. Sure. Political part. I'm sorry. I'm reading these questions. I don't know what the answer is with the glitch with the question on immigration. There is one question I know that I reported to our IT this week. That was blank, and I think it may have been the one you're finding, because I usually use immigration as my test topic. But I think that's a glitch, and we'll see what happens with that. I will take a look for it after the call and see if there's anything problematic there. The next question is, are there trends coming on the political partisanship category? I'm surprised that there's only one, and it doesn't have to do with party ID. Yeah, we will do that. We started this this process of building trends for the health poll database. So that means we focused on health related questions first. And the first 400 we did were all related to health. So you'll find this very easy to find things related to health in terms of finding trends, and health in a broader sense, things like discrimination, you're suffering stress, all sorts of different things are available because we built them for that separate portal. But we have now been able to turn toward the more political realm, and we've done some of the larger I tackled right track, wrong track. One of my colleagues here is tackling a generic ballot, and I say tackle because of that question wording difference. So you really are, you think you're going to go in, you're going to make one trend, it's going to be very large. In fact, you're going to make multiple trends, and they're all going to be fairly large. And the consistency is so important there. So she's working on that one now. And I think party ID is probably close to the top of the list of the big complex ones to do. So there's the ones that are just one question, really. Marijuana legal or not legal? That's basically one clean question. Then there's these things where everyone thinks of it as the same question: presidential approval, right track, wrong track, state of the economy, but they're actually a whole bunch of questions, and you kind of have to delve into them all at once to see where there are differences and how to put those together. So we'll be doing those big ones over the course of the coming year.
Kathleen, you may not have seen this question, but moving from the constellation of political partisanship questions, somebody asked if Roper had plans to focus on education questions and the constellation of questions around education.
Our plan is to get as many. The plan is to get every trend that we have eventually. It will take a while. It'll be a couple of years. But yes, we would want to do education. Education is important, and we have a number of organizations now that have questions in the database. Education Next, Ed Choice, that would actually, a lot of their stuff is done in the recently developed methods collection. We have a whole pile of data sets from them that we're working on that will be available there. So we have a lot of opportunity for questions around education, but at the moment, I know there are some that were done for the health poll database. I believe there were some that were done for the health poll database, but it hasn't been our highest priority. It has not, because we've been more focused on the health questions, and we've been focused on trying to then crack the nut of the big political science questions and throw in a little bit of everything else as well. So big important issues. There should be some in education, but it's not at the moment, it's not one of our particular priorities, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're trying to make sure everybody gets some. Everybody looking for things gets at least a few trends in their area.
The educators of America are standing on their chairs asking for more. It's simple as
They want trends.
They want trends.
Does anyone else have questions or something you'd like me to look for or explain?
I'm happy to unmute people's microphones. It'll just take a second, but you can always type a question as you want, and I'll start unmuting folks' microphones for the Q&A.
Many familiar names. Hello to you all. Always good to see you.
If your first name is from A to M, you should be able to unmute and ask a question live if you'd like. Now I'm up to R.
One question, teacher education. Teacher education. I'll see if we have one. You know, unfortunately, I could design you a question on teacher education in a second. Unfortunately, I am dependent on the data providers and what they're giving us. So I will see if we have one, and if there is, I will build it. Make sure you get that. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Bob. I'm very excited about trends, in part because I don't think there's anything that people have asked for more frequently. When I go and talk to people, show them the Roper database, there's always this question, well, how do I find the things? How do I know what's trending? How do I know how I can look at something over time? And it is a massive advantage of using iPoll that you can do this, but it wasn't that easy to do. Ray had his hand raised.
Hello.
Hi, Ray.
Hi. Hello. Some years ago, I used National Health Interview Survey data to follow trends in health and healthcare in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
The data were annual data, regular over time.
Right.
However, there were important differences in sample sizes, and it was a long time before I could get measures of variance to tell me whether there were statistically significant differences. The problems would be, I think, greater where you're taking it from many sources. Do you have any guidelines? What do you do for measuring differences?
Again, we leave some of this up to the researcher. We do provide the sample sizes. The sample size variation is not that great in our polls that are in most of the big media polls. Most of the big national nonprofit organization polls are running at somewhere between 800 and 1,200 people. Most of them are hovering right around 1,000, and the state polls are a little smaller, somewhere between 500 and 700. But there aren't massive differences in the number of people being interviewed. But we do include the information. You do have it in that spreadsheet when you download it, and so you can make adjustments as you see fit.
Okay, thank you.
Again, everyone's unmuted, so if you want to ask a question, feel free.
It's just so easy to use and so self-explanatory. Nobody has any questions. I'm like, I'm just gonna go and grab my trends now. That's
This is the part of the program where the Roper Center will pat itself on the back for a few moments. Hold on one second, I think. Okay, Ming Zhang asks, can you put trends into your folder?
Not yet. No, there are some updates coming to folders. That'll be exciting. And I don't remember if it's in the first cycle of those or the second cycle. That's an IT question. We want them to be able to be put into your folder, but it is not that there yet. Technology always takes time.
And I don't see any other questions right now. Anyone else? Otherwise, I will.
Hey, Kathleen, is there a way to request prioritization of certain trends being made?
Yes, just send something to data services. In fact, we're working on some right now that somebody asked for. Yeah. So, and you don't need to say a particular question that you want trended. You could say, gosh, I'm always getting people asking me about this particular area. I don't know, birth control or something. I don't know, some issue that we can find what trends are available and put them in. Absolutely.
It's a total softball question, Kathleen, but how long does it take to build a trend? Is it hours, days, weeks, months?
No, not months. It depends on the question, how messy it is. But with our system, it is relatively quick. I spent 2 days building one last week, I think 2 weeks ago. And sometimes I can build one in 20 minutes if it's really short, if it's a 5-question thing and it's clean. There are some really, really good questions from the early period of the AIDS epidemic that were done by the National Center for Health Statistics. They're all the same questions. They're deliberate trends, and we've got a whole bunch of those in there because they were so quick and easy to build, so they were all the same. But a messy big trend of something like right track, wrong track will take a while. So that's part of the balance of, do you want short ones and get a lot of them, or do you want a few and have them be really large? It's a big difference in time and commitment. And then we QA everything. So that's the second round. Thank you, Lynn. She's still.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I'll ask it one more time, but otherwise, thanks very much, Kathleen. I appreciate you taking the time. to do
Thank
this.
you very
Well,
much.
for coming.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Give you back 10 minutes of your time. Appreciate it. And as Kathleen said, if you do have questions or want to request a specific trend, data services and through the contact us button, just glad to listen to those requests and see what we can do for you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Stuff.
I'll be ending this now.
Great stuff.
Thank you very much.